Your gods have been hidden from you, not destroyed, not forgotten, hidden, buried beneath centuries of carefully constructed illusions and purposeful amnesia. From the moment your insatiable curiosity sparked the question, why? You were fed prepackaged answers designed to domesticate your spirit, to convince you that the divine was a distant, ethereal concept separate from your mundane existence and ultimately unreachable. But the truth simmering just beneath the surface of this fabricated reality is far more empowering and perhaps to those who seek to maintain control, far more terrifying than they would ever dare to admit. The real forces, the living intelligences that sculpt and permeate reality itself, have never abandoned us. They resonate within every breath you take, influence every choice you ponder, patiently awaiting your conscious recognition. Hermeticism, far from simply narrating myths of gods, served as a profound revelation, unveiling them as the very cosmic laws governing our universe, as potent archetypal powers pulsating within you and radiating outwards into the world. These are not mere myths or fanciful fairy tales. They constitute the very scaffolding upon which existence is built. And should you learn to perceive them, to comprehend their intricate workings, you can reclaim a potent force that has been rightfully yours from the very beginning. The pivotal question remains, are you prepared to remember what they have so meticulously labored to make you forget? Everything you've been taught about the nature of reality is a deliberately diluted and controlled version of a far more profound, ancient, and intrinsically powerful truth. Long before the establishment of modern religions with their rigid doctrines, long before science attempted to dissect the soul from the universe, Hermeticism offered a comprehensive blueprint, a living map of existence that transcends mere explanation, revealing instead the intricate tapestry in which you are inextricably woven. At the very heart of this timeless wisdom lies a truth so profoundly transformative that it poses a fundamental threat to every structure erected to control and limit you. Everything is the all. There is no inherent separation. There is no true distance between you and the source of divinity itself. The all represents pure consciousness, an infinite and boundless mind, the unwavering source of every atom, every fleeting thought, every rhythmic heartbeat reverberating throughout existence. And from this singular, unified mind, an infinite cascade of emanations flows forces that the ancient Hermetists recognized as gods, as sentient living intelligences actively shaping the very fabric of reality. These were certainly not the capricious gods of popularized myth and legend you encounter today. They were not whimsical beings perched upon gilded thrones, arbitrarily judging the follies of humankind from afar. They were instead the fundamental laws themselves, the inherent patterns and underlying rhythms that govern all things. They were the profound intelligences inherent in movement, in organic growth, in the inevitable process of decay, and in transformative renewal, the underlying forces that structure and sustain the very fabric of existence itself. To the Hermetic mind, a deep understanding of these forces transcended mere religious practice. It was an essential component of survival, a key to unlocking personal empowerment, the defining difference between being an unwitting slave to unseen laws and consciously becoming a co-creator alongside them. But knowledge of such transformative power could never be safely entrusted to the masses, and so it was carefully concealed, intentionally buried beneath layers of dogma and manipulative distractions. Hermeticism thus survived only in fragmented form, subtly disguised within esoteric symbols, whispered in clandestine gatherings amongst those few who dared to remember. Today, the prevailing narrative surrounding the universe rings hollow in comparison. You're encouraged to believe you are an insignificant speck of dust adrift in a meaningless void, devoid of inherent purpose. But Hermeticism emphatically refutes this notion. It proclaims that you are, in fact, a living progeny of the all, a direct and inseparable extension of the very cosmic mind itself. And these gods, these true architects of existence, are not distant idols to be passively worshipped, but vibrant forces intimately alive within you, patiently awaiting remembrance and subsequent reawakening. Before we delve further into this transformative wisdom, it is crucial to acknowledge this. There exist certain profound truths concerning these divine forces, truths of such exquisite sensitivity that they cannot be fully articulated on a public platform of this nature. This is precisely why we have established Insights Academy, our complimentary newsletter dedicated to sharing hidden knowledge that, due to its sensitive nature, cannot be published openly. If you aspire to delve deeper into these ancient mysteries and receive a complimentary ebook copy of The Kybalion for a limited duration, simply click on the link provided in the description below and submit your email address to subscribe. When you meticulously trace the enduring lineage of Hermetic thought, you will invariably discover these same fundamental principles resurfacing repeatedly, subtly concealed beneath the surface of alchemic practices, within the core of mystical traditions, and even deeply embedded in the very roots of both scientific inquiry and philosophical contemplation. They whisper of a time when humanity possessed an intrinsic understanding that they were not merely passive inhabitants of the universe, but active participants in its ongoing, ever-evolving creation. They knew the gods not as abstract myths, but as living truths, not as distant figures relegated to the annals of history, but as immediately accessible realities. Ultimately, understanding Hermeticism is not about engaging in the superficial worship of forgotten gods. It is about awakening to the profound realization that the very forces those gods represent are vibrantly alive and dynamically moving through you at this very moment. Every impulse you experience, every seemingly coincidental synchronicity you encounter, every inexplicable knowing that rises from the deepest wellsprings of your being, these are all resonant echoes of the divine intelligence subtly shaping your unique path. The more adept you become at recognizing these subtle signals, the more effectively you can align yourself with them. And this conscious alignment transcends mere spiritual poetry. It represents a genuine source of tangible power, a life-altering force capable of shaping your reality in profound ways. This ancient blueprint was never intended to render you passive or subservient. It was meticulously designed to ignite the latent divinity residing within you, that inherent aspect of your being that instinctively remembers. It is not a powerless victim of circumstance, but rather an intrinsic fragment of the infinite all, possessing the inherent capacity to subtly bend reality through the combined forces of understanding, focused intention, and unwavering will. When you consciously choose to work in harmony with these divine intelligences, your experience of life undergoes a dramatic transformation. Life ceases to feel like a random and chaotic series of events. Fate no longer appears to be a cruel and arbitrary force, and you no longer perceive yourself as insignificant or powerless. This forbidden blueprint, therefore, is not merely a philosophical system. It serves as a powerful mirror, reflecting back to you the essence of who you were always destined to be, and illuminating the transformative forces you can consciously master once you relinquish the limiting lies that have been perpetuated since you were old enough to listen. When you deliberately strip away the incessant noise, the manipulative distractions, the endless narratives you have been fed about gods seated upon celestial clouds dispensing arbitrary punishments for disobedience, you are left with something immeasurably more potent: the vibrant, living archetypes that inherently structure the very foundation of reality itself. In Hermeticism, the gods are not conceived as distant entities to be blindly worshipped. They are understood as potent forces, guiding principles and living patterns that actively animate every discernible and indiscernible facet of existence. They are the very architects of experience, the foundational scaffolding that supports the entire universe, the hidden currents flowing beneath the surface of what you superficially perceive as reality. These divine archetypes are not confined to the static pages of myth or confined within the narrow constructs of legend. They breathe life through the elements, express themselves through the cyclical rhythm of the seasons, manifest in the rise and fall of civilizations, and resonate within the private and often unspoken revolutions occurring within the depths of your own mind. They exist at the critical intersection between the human soul and the intricate cosmic machinery that governs everything. Within the framework of Hermeticism, to truly know the gods is not to passively bow before them in subservience. It is to consciously recognize their reflection within yourself, to perceive how each archetype corresponds to a living force already active within your own psyche. Every fundamental principle you encounter in life, movement, stillness, attraction, repulsion, creation, and destruction, is a living intelligence, a dynamic archetype actively at play. These are not merely random bursts of energy, but rather conscious patterns imbued with intrinsic meaning. Hermes Trismegistus profoundly taught that a thorough understanding of these forces was absolutely essential for mastering the very art of life itself. You were never intended to navigate life blindly, tossed and turned by forces you do not comprehend. You were meant to learn their language, to recognize their unique signatures, to move harmoniously in rhythm with them, and, through that conscious mastery, to ultimately transform your very fate. Each archetype possesses its own unique domain, its own resonant pulse, its own distinctive song within the grand symphony of existence. Some archetypes bring forth organic growth and abundant prosperity. Others usher in necessary endings in the inevitable process of decay. Some impart profound wisdom through periods of enforced solitude. Others ignite passionate fervor and initiate constructive conflict to forge you in the crucible of life's challenges. None of these forces can be simplistically categorized as inherently evil or inherently good, in the way you have likely been conditioned to believe. They are, in essence, fundamentally necessary. They function as both mirrors and teachers. And when you stubbornly refuse to acknowledge their presence, when you bury your head in the sand and desperately cling to the illusion that you are somehow separate from them, you inevitably suffer. Life begins to feel unpredictable, unfairly punishing, and ultimately devoid of inherent meaning. However, when you consciously choose to open your eyes, when you bravely choose to truly see, you will come to the profound realization that the gods were never inherently against you. They were, in fact, consistently offering you the keys to unlocking your own profound becoming. Consider this crucial point. Virtually every major experience in your life has, in reality, been a direct encounter with a potent archetype. When you experience the transformative rush of falling in love for the first time, the archetype of Venus moved powerfully through you. When you passionately fought for a cause you deeply believed in, the archetype of Mars was vibrantly alive within your very veins. When you endured profound loss and subsequently found yourself irrevocably transformed by grief, the archetype of Saturn stood steadfastly beside you, imparting invaluable lessons that superficial comfort could never have provided. When you awakened one morning with an unshakable vision of a life you were meant to purposefully build, the archetype of the sun itself whispered its incandescent fire into your very soul. This is not mere metaphorical poetry. It is the underlying fabric of reality. It is the fundamental truth that Hermeticism consistently points to, that you are not simply a passive observer in this life, but rather an active participant in a vast, conscious unfolding. The archetypes are not simply distant myths relegated to the pages of ancient texts. They represent the living grammar of existence itself, the very structural framework through which spirit intentionally communicates with matter. If you develop a comprehensive understanding of these archetypes, you can skillfully navigate life with profound clarity and potent power. If, on the other hand, you choose to ignore them, you will inevitably remain lost in a perpetual state of confusion, battered by forces you mistakenly believe are mere accidents or the result of blind fate. Ultimately, knowing the divine archetypes is not about mindlessly memorizing names from an antiquated text. It is about skillfully recognizing the unique signatures of these potent forces within your own heart, your own mind, your own personal struggles, and your hard-won triumphs. The ancients inherently understood this profound truth. They recognized that true power lies not in futilely resisting the gods, but rather in learning to dance harmoniously with them, to honor their deeply insightful lessons, to consciously call upon their assistance, rather than being unconsciously tossed and turned by them. They understood that when you purposefully move in alignment with the archetypes, when you deliberately listen to their underlying rhythms and intentionally embody their unique energies, you transcend mere survival and begin to genuinely thrive. You awaken to a life that feels intrinsically aligned, authentically empowered, and imbued with meaning in ways that cannot be adequately explained to those who remain trapped in the illusion of randomness. The archetypes, therefore, are not simply relics of a forgotten past. They are vibrantly alive now, actively moving through your innermost thoughts, your everyday choices, your meaningful relationships, and your most cherished ambitions. They are patiently waiting for you to recognize them, to boldly claim your rightful place, not as a powerless pawn of forces beyond your control, but as a conscious being purposefully dancing with the very principles that shape the stars that shine above you. The planets ceaselessly move through the heavens, meticulously tracing intricate patterns in the very fabric of existence. But these celestial movements are not simply random astronomical accidents, nor are they simply aesthetically pleasing displays of light in the night sky. In Hermeticism, each planet embodies a living intelligence, a divine force with its own distinct essence, unique influence, and intrinsic law. These are not distant rulers seated upon unreachable cosmic thrones. They are rather energies that vibrantly live within you, subtly shaping your thoughts, profoundly influencing your emotions, powerfully driving your desires, and ultimately influencing your very destiny. The ancients meticulously mapped these influential forces long before modern science methodically stripped the sky of its intrinsic soul. They understood that the planets were potent symbols of profound archetypal currents. Each planet reflects a principle that is simultaneously universal and profoundly personal. And by diligently learning to recognize these planetary powers, you begin to understand yourself at a depth most people never even glimpse. You are not simply a static personality, you are in fact a dynamic symphony of cosmic forces, a meeting place where the stars and the spirit intimately converge, where heaven and earth are inextricably intertwined. The sun represents the quintessential source of vitality, the unwavering will to create, the burning core of individual identity. When you confidently step into your own authentic power, when you allow yourself to shine without apology, you are purposefully moving in alignment with the potent force of the sun. It is the inherent God of illumination, not only in the celestial sky but also in the very center of your being. The moon inherently governs our emotions, subtly influencing our memories and quietly guiding our intuition. It represents the keeper of the vast subconscious mind, the powerful tide puller of your soul. When you feel inexplicably pulled by unseen forces, when your dreams communicate with you more clearly than waking words, it is the moon dynamically moving within you, teaching you that true wisdom is not solely derived from logical reasoning. Mercury represents the powerful force of communication, the inherent drive to think critically, and the dynamic energy of constant movement. It is the symbolic god of travel between disparate worlds, the vital bridge that connects the seen and the unseen. Your innovative ideas, your meaningful conversations, your insatiable curiosity, all are clear expressions of Mercury actively at play within you. Venus brings forth harmony, engenders beauty, and inspires attraction. It is the potent force that subtly draws people together, that imbues art with deep meaning, that elevates love beyond a mere biological imperative. When you experience a profound ache for beauty, a deep yearning for authentic connection, a powerful desire for ultimate unity, the archetype of Venus is vibrantly alive within you. Mars inherently embodies focused action, purposeful aggression, and consuming passion. It represents the vital spark that relentlessly pushes you to passionately fight for what you believe in, to confidently assert your will in the external world. Mars is not merely a destructive force, it represents essential courage, the unwavering refusal to remain passive in the face of life's inevitable challenges. Jupiter embodies the powerful force of organic expansion, inherent wisdom, and boundless abundance. It represents the archetypal teacher, the relentless explorer, the generous bringer of blessings. When you feel an undeniable call to grow beyond your current limitations, to take calculated risks, to relentlessly seek more than mere survival, the archetype of Jupiter is quietly whispering to you. Saturn, often unjustly feared, inherently governs limitation, deliberate discipline, and essential structure. It is the potent force that rigorously tests you, that demands deep growth through enduring challenges, but it also represents the unwavering keeper of enduring mastery. Without the crucial lessons imparted by Saturn, no true strength can ever be genuinely forged. These 7 potent planetary powers are not simply celestial bodies spinning endlessly through space. They are in reality intricately imprinted within your very being. Each movement you make, each powerful emotion you feel, each transformative lesson you ultimately endure is an essential part of an ancient cosmic dance that has been unfolding since long before the dawn of human memory. You are not, therefore, inherently separate from the stars. You are, in essence, their resonant echo, their ongoing continuation, their living representative. But here lies the tragedy. Modern life has unfortunately severed this vital connection. You are erroneously taught to perceive the planets as lifeless rocks, to dismiss astrology as a ridiculous joke, to disregard the deep intuitive wisdom that once guided entire civilizations. This collective ignorance is not simply accidental. It is an integral part of a pervasive system designed to keep you feeling small, inherently disconnected, and ultimately disempowered. This is because when you tragically lose your intrinsic relationship to the powerful forces that birthed you, you become remarkably easy to manipulate, readily susceptible to control, and effortlessly sold a false identity. Reawakening your profound connection to these planetary powers is not an act of superstitious folly. It is, in reality, an act of remembering who you truly are. It is the vital act of consciously tuning your life to the deeper currents of reality, currents that existed long before the emergence of towering skyscrapers, volatile stock markets, and ubiquitous smartphone screens. It is the essential act of learning to purposefully move in harmony with the universe rather than struggling futilely against it, to intuitively sense when it is the appropriate time to act decisively, and when it is the appropriate time to patiently wait, when it is wise to passionately fight, and when it is time to gracefully surrender, when it is best to clearly speak, and when it is essential to respectfully listen. When you diligently learn to recognize the subtle influence of the planets within you, life ceases to feel like a random and chaotic series of events. You no longer perceive yourself as cursed or blessed by mere accident. You begin to discern the underlying patterns, recognize the cyclical rhythms, and comprehend the profound larger story you are inherently a part of. You cease fighting blindly against fate and begin purposefully co-creating with forces far older and immeasurably wiser than any human institution or political ideology. These 7 planetary powers are not merely mythical figures. They are, in reality, compelling invitations, heartfelt offers from the cosmos itself to step fully into your own authentic being, to consciously claim your rightful place, not as a powerless pawn in a meaningless world, but as a vibrant participant in the living, breathing intelligence of existence itself. You were never intended to remain static and unchanging. Everything in the natural world inherently transforms, constantly evolves, inevitably decays, and is subsequently reborn, and so too must you. In Hermeticism, the gods are not conceived as static ideals frozen within the pages of myth. They are understood as living forces of constant movement, inherent cycles, and perpetual rebirth. They govern not only the external world that surrounds you, but also the essential processes that are dynamically unfolding inside you every single day. To comprehensively understand the gods is to deeply understand that life itself is an intrinsically sacred act of alchemy, in which nothing remains static, and dynamic transformation is the essential price of enduring evolution. There are archetypal gods of creation, potent forces that actively call forth new worlds, generate new possibilities, and forge new identities. These are the precise moments when you feel a surge of creative inspiration, an undeniable pull to initiate new endeavors, to purposefully build, and to actively manifest something that has never existed before. However, creation cannot exist in isolation from destruction. Just as the vibrant renewal of spring must inherently follow the dormancy of winter, new life must necessarily be paid for with the inherent death of the old. Within the framework of Hermetic thought, the archetypal gods of destruction are not malevolent forces of cruelty, but rather essential agents of necessary liberation. They tear down that which has long outlived its inherent purpose, that which no longer actively serves your highest potential, that which has become a restrictive prison subtly disguised as comfortable familiarity. When something in your life inevitably falls apart, when a long-held job abruptly ends, when an intimate relationship dissolves, when a carefully constructed version of yourself slowly dies a protracted death, it is not the result of random chaos. It is the expression of a potent God force actively moving through you, methodically stripping away your deeply held illusions and purposefully creating space for something truer to be birthed. Without knowledge, these seemingly inevitable transformations can feel undeniably brutal, inexplicably senseless, and inherently punishing. Without profound awareness, you reflexively resist, you desperately cling, and you inevitably suffer. Hermeticism profoundly teaches that when you come to a thorough understanding of the fundamental nature of these potent forces, you will cease to irrationally fear change. You will consciously recognize death not as an implacable enemy, but rather as a crucial gatekeeper to profound new life. Transformation, therefore, is not a mere accident. It is not simply something that arbitrarily happens to you if you are either exceptionally lucky or inherently cursed. It is, in essence, an intrinsically sacred process that methodically unfolds according to the immutable laws of the cosmos. Every death you endure, every loss you suffer, every outdated identity you inevitably outgrow represents a necessary sacrifice upon the sacred altar of your own profound becoming. The gods are not, therefore, arbitrarily punishing you. They are actively forging you in the crucible of experience. They are methodically burning away that which is fundamentally false so that that which is inherently real can purposefully rise. Alchemists, the spiritual descendants of ancient Hermetic thought, understood this profound truth with deep clarity. They inherently knew that the process of transforming base lead into precious gold was never merely about the literal transformation of physical metal. It was, in reality, about the profound transformation of the very soul itself. It was about skillfully utilizing the inevitable fires of suffering, the seemingly insurmountable trials of life, and the inevitable cycles of both destruction and subsequent rebirth to intentionally purify the self and to ultimately awaken the inherent divinity residing within. They inherently knew that without experiencing the profound blackening, there could never be a subsequent whitening. Without first experiencing the painful breakdown, there could never be a transformative breakthrough. The gods of creation, the gods of destruction, and the gods of dynamic transformation are not, in reality, at war with each other. They are simply different facets of the same vibrant, living process, and you are not merely a passive observer of this essential process. You are, in essence, its vital vessel. You are the very crucible in which the fundamental cosmic forces of life purposefully forge new and transformative realities. When you reflexively resist, you inevitably break. When you consciously align, you invariably transform. There can be no authentic evolution without the inherent presence of death, no genuine growth without the conscious act of letting go, and no profound awakening without fully surrendering the limited identity you thought you were in order to embrace the authentic identity you were always meant to embody. Hermeticism offers no superficial comfort. It does not deceptively promise you that life will be inherently painless or easily predictable. It rather offers you the profound truth that life is, in essence, a transformative alchemical furnace, and you are here to be purposefully transformed by its relentless fires. Once you thoroughly comprehend this profound truth, you will begin to perceive your life through an entirely new lens. Every seemingly detrimental setback becomes a crucial signal. Every painful ending becomes an open door, and every devastating fall becomes a clear call to purposefully rise in a profoundly new form. The gods are not arbitrarily punishing you. They are, in reality, proactively calling you to purposefully embrace your next transformative incarnation. They are strategically stripping away that which you no longer fundamentally need so that you can consciously carry forward only that which is inherently pure, that which is ultimately essential, and that which is undeniably true. Transformation, therefore, is not a betrayal of who you once were. It is, in essence, the ultimate act of genuine loyalty to who you are actively becoming. The gods of Hermeticism do not demand blind worship. They rather demand conscious courage, unwavering awareness, and a sincere willingness to repeatedly die and be purposefully reborn until you consciously remember that you are not merely a transient creature of flesh and fear. You are, in fact, an eternal and ever-evolving fragment of the divine, destined not to stagnate in comfortable complacency, but rather to soar to new heights of potential. You are not a mistake. You are not an accident. You're not a meaningless fragment tragically lost in an indifferent universe. Hermeticism profoundly teaches something radically different from the pervasive modern lie of inherent cosmic insignificance. It whispers an ancient and empowering truth: as above, so below. That which intrinsically exists in the heavens also inherently exists within you. That which powerfully moves the stars also powerfully moves your very blood. The structural framework of the entire universe is inherently the structural framework of your own soul. You are simultaneously the mirror and the mirroring. You are both the divine creation and the inherent creator. When Hermes Trismegistus purposefully inscribed this profound principle onto the sacred emerald tablet, he was gifting humanity with the master key to understanding the ultimate nature of reality. But tragically, somewhere along the convoluted path of human history, the world either consciously forgot or was intentionally made to forget. Modern systems deliberately teach you to perpetually look outward for all the answers, to artificially separate yourself from the very world you inhabit, to perceive yourself as inherently small and ultimately powerless, tragically at the mercy of forces you can never hope to truly understand. However, Hermeticism stands in defiant opposition to this pervasive and disempowering narrative. It purposefully reminds you that everything you desperately seek in the heavens is already meticulously encoded within your very being. Every cosmic law, every influential planetary force, and every divine archetype vibrantly breathes within you. When the ancients purposefully looked up at the vast array of stars, they were not merely charting the distant locations of celestial bodies. They were in reality meticulously charting the profound anatomy of the very soul itself. They inherently knew that the twinkling stars overhead and the indwelling spirit within were simply two sides of the very same undeniable truth. They thoroughly understood that meaningful transformation could not be forcibly imposed from external sources. It had to be consciously awakened from within by diligently recognizing and then purposefully aligning with the immutable universal patterns already deeply embedded within the most profound layers of your very consciousness. You are the microcosm, the inherent little world that contains all the vital elements of the macrocosm, the great world. When you purposefully heal yourself, you simultaneously heal an intrinsic piece of the greater cosmos. When you diligently align your conscious mind with higher guiding principles, you not only profoundly improve the overall quality of your own life, you also purposefully resonate with the foundational harmonies of existence itself. Every fleeting thought you intentionally purify, every debilitating fear you ultimately overcome, and every profound truth you boldly embody sends powerful ripples through the unseen fabric of the world, proactively helping to rebalance essential forces that dynamically stretch far beyond the limited confines of your immediate life. But unfortunately, this invaluable knowledge has been effectively buried beneath countless layers of pervasive materialism and debilitating nihilism. You are actively taught that engaging in meaningful healing is somehow inherently selfish, that actively engaging in personal inner work is somehow inherently self-indulgent, and that purposefully looking inward is simply a wasteful expenditure of precious time when there is ostensibly an entire world to somehow single-handedly fix. However, Hermeticism profoundly reveals the exact opposite to be undeniably true. The only world you can ever hope to genuinely change is the one that intrinsically exists within you. And by proactively changing that inner world, you subsequently shift the entire external world. When a critical mass of individuals purposefully realign with the inherent divine archetypes residing within, the external world must inevitably change to reflect that pervasive inner shift. Reality is not static. It dynamically responds to the unique consciousness that actively perceives it. You are not therefore merely a passive observer. You are rather an active and essential participant in its ongoing unfolding. This is precisely why comprehensive mastery of the self has always represented the highest calling in Hermetic teachings. Not because it somehow elevates you above others, but rather because it transforms you into a clearer and more effective channel through which the vital universal forces can effortlessly flow. A mind riddled with chaos inevitably distorts reality. A mind purposefully aligned with profound truth purposefully shapes it with clarity of intention. If you can successfully bring the microcosm into harmonious alignment, you purposefully bring a small but undeniably potent corner of the macrocosm back into essential balance, and enough such carefully balanced corners will inevitably create an entirely new and profoundly harmonious world. When you feel tragically lost, when you feel undeniably powerless, when you feel crushed beneath the overwhelming weight of forces ostensibly far larger than you, consciously remember that those very forces are not in any way foreign. They are rather faint echoes of the essential divine energies already intrinsically inside you, patiently waiting to be consciously recognized, eagerly waiting to be fully embraced, and patiently waiting to be purposefully embodied. The destructive wars raging outside are simply a reflection of the destructive wars raging within. The lasting peace you so desperately seek must first be purposefully born in your own heart. Every hard-won victory within you represents a powerful victory for the all. As above, so below, As within, so without. This is not simply a metaphor, it represents a fundamental law. It is the structural framework of reality itself, subtly hidden in plain sight. You are not here to passively beg for merciful intervention from an external God. You are here to actively awaken the potent God force that purposefully sleeps within your very cells, your measured breath, and your flowing blood. You are here to purposefully embody the inherent cosmos, to consciously remember that your very soul is intrinsically made of the same essential fire that births the stars, the same inherent intelligence that methodically spins the vast galaxies, and the same unconditional love that effortlessly holds all things together. When you purposefully align with this fundamental truth, life ceases to be a constant battle for scarce scraps of inherent meaning. It rather transforms into a beautiful dance, a meaningful conversation, and a purposeful act of conscious co-creation with existence itself. You cease chasing powerlessly after illusory power outside yourself, and rather recognize the boundless power that is already purposefully running through your very veins. You become a conscious participant in the eternal unfolding of the one mind, no longer tragically lost in the darkness, no longer passively waiting for external validation, but rather finally awake and fully aware of your own inherent potential. Those who seek to control you do not want you to know this. They cannot, in fact, afford for you to consciously know this, because a human being who fully understands their intrinsic connection to the powerful divine forces is a human being who can never be effectively controlled, a human being who can never be manipulated against their will, and a human being who can never be truly broken. And so they purposefully buried it. They purposefully buried Hermeticism. They purposefully buried the profound truth of the gods. They purposefully buried the essential knowledge that the distant stars are not separate from your eternal soul, but rather an inextricable part of it. And they purposefully replaced it with rigid systems built intentionally on obedience, debilitating fear, and artificial separation. The great religions forcefully rose on the smoldering ashes of ancient wisdom, instead of purposefully teaching you that the gods are inherently powerful forces you can actively work with. They taught you rather to passively bow in fearful subservience, to desperately beg for external intervention, and to consciously fear the inevitable repercussions of disobedience. They deliberately turned dynamic cosmic laws into anthropomorphic deities seated upon unreachable thrones of arbitrary judgment, aggressively demanding unwavering loyalty under the dire threat of eternal punishment. They purposefully severed your direct connection to the All and strategically inserted themselves as self-appointed middlemen between you and your own intrinsic divinity. They subsequently sold salvation as a commodity, and you unwittingly became the desperate buyer, perpetually feeling inherently inadequate, constantly needing to somehow earn their unearned favor, and never realizing that you yourself were, in fact, the favor. Later, empirical science aggressively took up the blade. In their ardent war against the purported evils of religious superstition, they tragically threw out the inherent soul altogether. They erroneously told you that the entire universe was merely a dead machine, a cold and indifferent chaos inherently devoid of intelligence, ultimately lacking in inherent meaning and fundamentally bereft of any intrinsic purpose. They falsely reduced you to a mere statistical anomaly, a bizarre and ultimately meaningless accident of colliding atoms, and then erroneously called it progress. They fervently worshipped reason to the exclusion of all else, and then amputated the innate human capacity for wonder. They generously gave you potentially useful technology, but simultaneously stole your intrinsic connection to the living cosmos. They arrogantly taught you to laugh derisively at the very idea that the planets could somehow communicate with you, that potent archetypes could vibrantly live within you, and that you could somehow be anything more than a transient collection of meat and bone destined for the inevitable decay of time. And then came the final devastating blow, the pervasive rise of rampant consumer culture. If those in power could not effectively make you obediently worship blatantly false gods, and could not fully convince you to believe in absolutely nothing, they would then resort to deliberately making you believe in everything that inherently kept you small, ultimately ephemeral products, meaningless brands, and inherently hollow status symbols. They deliberately taught you to seek your inherent identity not in purposeful alignment with the distant stars, but rather in the transient clothes you superficially wear, the fleeting car you temporarily drive, and the largely meaningless number of virtual followers you futilely count. They built a false and ultimately unattainable heaven out of artificial flashing lights and an endless proliferation of intrusive screens and deceptively called it freedom, all the while the profound ancient wisdom of the Hermetic gods lay patiently waiting, largely forgotten, and just beyond the carefully manufactured edge of your thoroughly programmed perception. This was not a mere accident. It was, in reality, a meticulously crafted system perfected over successive generations. A system that profoundly understood that the greatest threat to its enduring existence was not external rebellion, not organized protest, and not even outright violence, but rather widespread and meaningful awakening. Awakening to the profound truth that you are an integral part of the living universe, that you are fully capable of purposefully moving in harmony with the potent forces that actively shape entire worlds, that you do not somehow need external permission to inherently possess power, and that you are inherently born with the very architecture of the cosmos already meticulously encoded within your resilient spirit. This is because an awakened being is inherently unpredictable. Awakened beings cannot be easily herded into rigid political parties or readily seduced into soulless corporate loyalty programs. Awakened beings cannot be easily seduced by cheap pleasures or easily cowed by artificially manufactured fears. Awakened beings do not actively seek validation from external sources. Awakened beings do not blindly tremble before false authorities. Awakened beings rather purposefully walk with the inherent gods alive within them, skillfully guided by the subtle rhythms of the cosmos, and largely immune to the pervasive noise of a dying system desperately attempting to maintain its tenuous grip on power and control. And so those in power deliberately made you forget. They deliberately made you afraid to purposefully look up at the night sky and fearlessly see your profound self reflected in its inherent vastness. They deliberately made you laugh derisively at ancient wisdom, falsely denouncing it as mere foolishness, deliberately made you scoff dismissively at inherent intuition, falsely labeling it as blatant superstition, and deliberately made you feel ashamed to trust the silent knowing that inevitably rises unbidden from the depths of your profound soul. However, the inherent gods have not in any way abandoned you. They have rather waited patiently, humming quietly in the subtle background of your most vivid dreams, orchestrating powerful synchronicities in your daily life, and manifesting in rare moments of inexplicable awe. They have purposefully whispered to you through the ever-present cracks in the overarching system, through the subtle moments you could not adequately explain, and through the haunting feeling that there is demonstrably more to life than what you have been erroneously told. The inherent gods are still here. They are still vibrantly alive within you, and they are patiently waiting, not for your abject worship, but rather for your conscious recognition, purposefully waiting for the precise moment when you consciously remember that you were never intended to live a small and inconsequential life tethered to someone else's inherently limited and ultimately flawed idea of truth. You were rather intended to dance joyfully with the stars, to purposefully move with the powerful tides of ever-present creation, and to consciously awaken fully to the ancient currents of inherent power that have always been your birthright. The overarching question is not whether or not the inherent gods are actually real. The far more profound and consequential question is whether you are sufficiently willing to remember them and, in consciously doing so, to fundamentally remember yourself. You do not in any way have to perpetually remain tragically cut off from your true potential. You do not in any way have to live the remainder of your precious life under the dangerous illusion that you are inherently powerless, that you are inherently separate, and that you are tragically at the arbitrary mercy of unknown forces you were never sufficiently taught to adequately understand. The very moment you consciously choose to actively remember, to diligently seek, and to purposefully align, the inherent gods will begin to stir powerfully within you once again. Reclaiming your intrinsic connection to the powerful divine forces is not merely a matter of engaging in superficial ritual or blindly adhering to rigid dogma. It is, in reality, a transformative act of profound awakening. It is a conscious decision to see with clear and unclouded eyes, to wholeheartedly feel with an open and receptive heart, and to purposefully walk through your life fully conscious of the inherent and ancient powers actively moving through every single moment. The critical first step is simply to pay keen and intentional attention. Diligently pay attention to the patterns that both dynamically rise and then inevitably fall within you. When you are powerfully gripped by an otherwise inexplicable surge of courage, the archetype of Mars is demonstrably near. When you are inexplicably pulled into periods of intense reflection and quiet inner silence, the archetype of Saturn is demonstrably moving through your very veins. When unprompted joy purposefully bubbles up within you without obvious external cause, when a casual conversation feels strangely guided by unseen and benevolent hands, when a seemingly chance meeting irrevocably changes everything, these are not merely random and meaningless accidents. They are rather powerful echoes of the living intelligences that are ceaselessly dancing with your eternal soul. The more diligently you consciously pay attention, the louder their inherent voices will inevitably become. Diligently reclaiming your intrinsic connection to the divine forces means proactively shedding the dead weight of potentially crippling modern programming. It inherently means consciously questioning those limiting beliefs that actively keep you feeling small, proactively breaking free from those counterproductive habits that deliberately numb your inherent instincts and purposefully dismantling those restrictive routines that consistently dull your essential awareness. It deliberately means proactively walking away from those pervasive systems that actively thrive on your inherent disconnection, and rather purposefully turning inward to the ancient and inherently sacred temples purposefully built into your very being, your brilliant mind, your resilient body, and your powerful emotions. These are the ancient altars where the inherent gods will still willingly speak, so long as you consciously know how to deliberately listen. You do not in any way need explicit permission to actively reconnect with the divine. You do not in any way need external intermediaries. You do not in any way need someone else's arbitrary blessing to consciously remember what your very soul has intrinsically always known. The powerful divine forces have never intentionally left you. They have rather. So to bring it all together, the real takeaway here is that the power you seek, the connection you crave, isn't some distant, unattainable thing. It's already within you. The gods, these incredible fundamental forces of the universe, are alive and well, waiting for you to remember them, to recognize their influence in your life, and to consciously dance with them. It's about breaking free from the manufactured illusions that have kept you small and stepping into the truth of who you truly are, a vital, connected, and powerful part of the all. I'd absolutely love to hear your thoughts on this. What resonated with you the most? Have you experienced these forces in your own life? Leave a comment below, ask a question, and let's get a conversation going. And if this message sparked something within you, please subscribe. I'll be sharing more insights and explorations into these hidden truths, and I don't want you to miss out on the journey. Until next time, keep seeking, keep remembering, and keep awakening to the incredible power that resides within you.